If there's one thing Dungeons & Dragons has given us since day one, it's a steady supply of absolutely batshit insane monsters. And sometimes those monsters aren't just gabagools from the depths meant to be fought by the adventuring party, but also gabagools from the depths meant to join the adventuring party. So today, we're gonna be taking a look at one of the strangest creatures from D&D's past that is both an enemy and a player character race option. Today, we're talking about the, I wanna say, Xixchil? God, who names this stuff? If you've got creaky knees like me, or you've just been watching this channel for a while, it won't be a surprise to hear that our monster this week got its start in Spelljammer. For the uninitiated, Spelljammer is the Dungeons & Dragons setting equivalent of an 80s pirate space opera, and it fucking rules. The cool thing about it though is that all of the technology and other space stuff, at least for the most part, is still heavily rooted in D&D's high fantasy world, so you can take most things from Spelljammer and use them in a more conventional D&D game, or vice versa, with very little concern that it won't fit. Which is great, because you find me a dungeon master and I'll find you someone who has a world cobbled together from all their favorite stuff, which may or may not include something from the AD&D 2nd edition Monsters Compendium Spelljammer Appendix. A book whose title rolls right off the tongue and has one of my favorite pieces of art on the cover. There's like this purple insect pirate with a neck ruff and an eye patch and a Colt 45, and this insane looking demon man who looks like what you'd get if you just typed evil bad guy into Google, and between the two of them, this middle-aged bald clown noble wearing an expression I can only describe as, can you believe this shit? Oh well. Why does he have fingerless gloves? Anyways, this book was published in 1991, and close to the back of it we have the Xixchil, who immediately has a lot going on. The original depiction shows them as what is more or less a giant praying mantis coming on in with some sick bling and what looks like knives just kind of welded onto some rings it's wearing that are jammed onto its lower claws. Also, this pose is so funny because if you imagine the rest of the creature's body, I can't help but feel like it should just be keeling over. I don't know. There's a lot to love and a lot to be confused about, but as for the actual creature itself, the Xixchil is a mantid species who appear as more or less a human-sized praying mantis if you gave them like a 10% bump on the anthro scale. They are somewhat similar to the three crane in that they are both mantid species with 4 arms. However, there are some big differences between the two species, and frankly, the fact that you even thought they were similar is kind of problematic. If you could sum up the personality of a Xixchil in one word, that word would be precision. Xixchil are craftsmen first and foremost. They are renowned for making fine metalwork, clothing, and clockwork devices among the best that gold pieces can buy. But chief among their delicate work is the work they do on living beings. Their commitment to perfecting the practice of medicine and surgery is borderline religious amongst the Xixchil. Becoming an accomplished surgeon within their culture is something akin to being the head of a religious organization, though without a god. To the Xixchil, the body of a living creature is like a house in which that creature lives, so therefore your body is merely a blank shell and not truly your home until you have decorated and renovated it to suit your needs and tastes. This makes the Xixchil incredibly easy to tell apart, since no two individuals are likely to have the same modifications, and their modifications tend to run the gauntlet from mild to extreme. They often paint their exoskeletons the same way that a creature with skin might get tattoos, and they pierce their shells with finery, even going as far as to get gemstones set into the exoskeletons itself. But all of that is mild for a Xixchil, because they are on some extreme body mod type stuff. Within their culture, it is not uncommon to have their exoskeleton reshaped and molded into a unique design, or even to add extra body parts here and there. Xixchil with extra limbs, wings, extra eyes, and any combination of internal body modifications are all pretty commonplace, and this is how they create a sense of identity for themselves. In fact, many Xixchil don't even have a name until they've received their first significant body modification, and that modification is what informs the name they go by. For example, a Xixchil with an exoskeleton shaped with many spikes might be called Spike, or an individual with multiple stomachs might be called Glutton. To a Xixchil, all their name is a mere representation of their body, and like their body, it is always subject to change and evolution. If a Xixchil takes on a new major modification that alters them in some way, their name will often be adjusted or changed entirely to better represent this new identity. And while Xixchil culture prides itself on surgical mastery, access to their methods is far from secretive. In fact, Xixchil will often establish themselves in urban centers as surgical experts who earn a comfortable living, catering to the needs of the locals. If you need a complex, life-saving surgery, you can't really ask for anything better than to have the services of a Xixchil on hand. And as far as body modifications go, That's their bread and butter. The Xixchil would only be mentioned across D&D editions one more time, and that was in Dragon Magazine 266, published in December of 1999, as part of an ecology article. I've talked about these articles in the past, most recently in the Gorbel video, and they are some of my favorite stuff from the old magazines. These ecology articles are more or less meant to give the reader a short story involving the creature, and then at the bottom of the page there will be notes explaining the game mechanics and some more in-depth lore of the creatures that are part of the story. It's a really neat and unique way to present information like this, and this particular ecology article is pretty great. It more or less tells the story of a Xixchil named Darter, who runs a body modification shop in a spelljamming port town, which is basically just like a normal port town, except it's in magic space and not on the coast of some island. The actual information here more or less reiterates the stuff from their original entry, however, it provides a ton of insight into their personality and gives a few great examples of how they view other creatures, as well as how those other creatures view them. Xixchil are methodical and utilitarian. They take a function over form outlook on most things because to them, function is form, with artistic flourishes coming second to the actual usefulness of a modification. In the story, the space pirate who walks into Darter's shop is obviously on the run from the law and wants to change his appearance. Ultimately, he lands on having his hair and eye color changed. However, Darter, our Xixchil protagonist, offers him a wide variety of options, including increasing or decreasing his height and weight, changes to his bone structure, and even offering to change his sex. There's also a point in the story where we see a client who is in the middle of a pretty major alteration to give her wings. The two Xixchil in the operating room then spend some time discussing how they are coaxing the growth of these new wings and how they will need to finish hollowing out her bones and how they've completed the expansion of her lungs, all of which will be necessary in order for her to fly. By the end of the story, our original client who wanted his hair and eyes changed walks away happy with the adjustment, but is kind of annoyed that as part of the hair treatment they gave him a permanent bald spot. And when he brings this up, the Xixchil are confused about why that would bother him, because if the point is that he won't be recognized, the addition of the bald spot should only further sell this new identity. Right? To them, it's beautiful because it's functional, and they don't understand why this guy would be at all upset about that. The article also gives some insight into the Xixchil life cycle, which is about as insane as you'd expect. Without getting into the finer points of it all, our protagonist goes off to lay some eggs in the forest and has to resist biting off the head of anyone who gets near her while all of that happens. Fortunately for her boyfriend, he manages to avoid getting decapitated, and he even leaves her a meal in the form of a tied-up goblin pirate, which, I mean, if that ain't love, I don't know what is. Once the eggs of a Xixchil are laid in the wilds, the parents literally never think about them again, and they move on with their lives. When a pod of Xixchil babies hatch from their eggs, they are immediately starving and will more or less cannibalize one another for the first few days, before finally reaching semi-maturity and wandering from the wilderness towards civilization, at which point they are often adopted by the first Xixchil they come across, who then acts as their mentor and guide, teaching them their cultural ways, as well as providing for them until they're fully mature. So basically, they're born into a no-holds-barred gladiatorial arena, the survivors of which will just go find someone to be their parents. The circle of life. Now, as a potential player character species and as a monstrous enemy to be fought in combat, the Xixchil have some really neat stuff going on. Before we dive into that, I gotta give a massive shout out. Hit Play Pulse is genuinely one of the coolest TTRPG tools I have seen in a while. It's an app for your phone that allows you to play immersive background music for your tabletop game of choice, but get this. Each track has multiple layers and variants, and with the press of a button, you can seamlessly transition between different versions of the same song. For example, you might have a mostly ambient track playing while your players scour the depths of an old dungeon, but when they're ambushed by a group of skeletons, you can increase the tension, seamlessly transitioning into a version of that track which sounds a bit more intense. And then when the Mummy Lord rises from his tomb and begins to unleash all of his power on the players, you can up the stakes even further, transitioning into something awesome and epic, pressing the victory button when the time is right to conclude the epic battle music in a crescendo before fading back into something more neutral and ambient. Basically, Hit Play Pulse lets you score your game like a movie with very little preparation and tons of flexibility to set the right vibe depending on what's happening at the game table moment by moment. I don't really talk about this much on this channel, but I'm something of a composer myself, and I can tell you right now that this app has got a ton of work put into it, and they're doing some really awesome stuff behind the scenes scenes here that is kind of mind-blowing. And that's not even getting into the sound effects library that comes with this app. So if that sounds like something you want to check out, and I highly recommend you do, follow the link in the description down below and head on over to the Hit Play Pulse website where you can listen to some demos and sign up to be an MVP supporter to secure early access to the app along with a bunch of awesome exclusive Kickstarter rewards before the Kickstarter goes live on July 7th. This project is extremely dope, all of the music is 100% human made, and I can't wait to use it at my own table. So once again, thank you to Hit Play Pulse for bringing us here today to talk about some praying mantis people. Speaking of which, we got a few things to go over here. As an NPC type monster, there is obviously a lot of potential for variation among their stats. I created 3 main stat blocks to serve as the baseline for what a Xixchil might look like in D&D, but as always, you are highly encouraged to come up with your own adjustments or unique stat blocks altogether if you want to make a Xixchil NPC for your adventuring party to interact with in some way. But as for my 5e conversion of this monster, first and foremost, we have the basic Xixchil. This is a CR2 creature that has a lot going on. Their primary attack is going to be with their 2 massive built-in weapons, those being the bladed fuck-off scythe arms all Xixchils have from birth. They also have a ranged attack in the form of a dart launcher that has been molded into their exoskeleton, which is one of the most popular modifications a Xixchil can have. They've also got a bite attack that deals some piercing damage and some poison damage, which is nice, but not the reason why their bite is so deadly. If a Xixchil has a blood sample from a living creature, which it usually collects by biting them, it can synthesize a paralytic poison in the glands of its mouth that specifically targets the creature whose blood sample they've collected, meaning that if this thing bites you on its next turn, it can concoct a poison that is entirely harmless to anyone else and will only affect you. And if it bites you again, or spits that poison onto a weapon, such as the bladed forearms, before they hit you, you gotta make a save to avoid being paralyzed. Being paralyzed sucks, because when you are paralyzed, not only can you not do anything, but you're also incapacitated, and if you're incapacitated and someone hits you with a melee attack, it's automatically a crit. Now, in order for this to happen, the creature will need to hit with its bite, and then use a bonus action to make the poison, and then hit with the poison, and then you will need to fail your save, so there are 3 hurdles that need to be overcome, but if the dice are not on your side, this can get nasty. In a more narrative capacity, the Xixchil can use a more concentrated dose of this poison to put a creature to sleep for much longer periods of time, which they often use while performing surgery, so outside of combat, they basically have a built-in method of anesthesia, which is cool. Playing into the more advanced surgeon archetype, we have the CR5 version of this creature, which I named the Xixchil Ministrator. This is more or less a beefed up version of the lower CR variant with expertise in medicine and a new trait called Surgical Precision, which more or less allows the Ministrator to sever a creature's limb anytime it scores a crit, and if the damage from the attack knocks the target to 0, it can decapitate them, assuming the target has a head. As I just explained with the whole poison thing, this creature has a way to try and force a critical hit, and barring that, it might just get lucky, so be careful around this keen-eyed surgeon. Lastly, we have the Warrior, which is a CR8 variant inspired by the Ecology article in the original monster entry. Apparently, Xixchil who choose the path of a warrior often get heavily modified in service to fighting better. So, this variant stat block not only has beefed up stats when compared to the basic Xixchil, but it also has 2 extra arms which it can use to hurl javelins and make more attacks both in melee and from a range. Or, it can take a defensive posture by not attacking with those extra arms and increase its armor class by 2 until the start of its next turn. Between that, cunning action, and the ability to parry, the Xixchil Warrior is not someone you want to cross swords with. Lastly, as a player race option, I of course made sure to include some mechanics that will allow you to inhabit an exoskeleton of your own. All of our player-facing stuff here is more or less just a player-fied version of the Xixchil's abilities, including their natural weapons, the monstrosity creature type, access to dark vision, proficiency in sleight of hand, and the ability to create mouth poison, and of course, a trait taken straight from the 2nd edition book, the details of the Xixchil's unusual body, because it turns out when your body looks like this, a normal suit of plate armor ain't gonna fit. That doesn't mean you can't wear armor, you just gotta pay a little extra to get it custom fit to your body. I'm so curious to hear about any of you who decide to play a Xixchil character or who might have a Xixchil character in a game you're running in the future, so if that's you, let me know. Otherwise, Let's talk a little bit about how to use this bad boy at the game table. One of the most fun ways to use the Xixchil is, of course, as an NPC running a body mod shop. Allowing your players to customize themselves can range from something weird and fun to something dramatic to a proper plot device. If the players are on the run from a big bad, maybe a Xixchil body shop can allow them to avoid detection for a while. The cool thing about the Xixchil and their methodology is that while they definitely use magic to aid in their surgeries, the final results are not magical, meaning that someone with true sight or the ability to see through illusions won't be able to discern that the person they're looking at has had their appearance altered, at least not with magic. This is also a fun opportunity for the players to get some cool body mods for aesthetic or even mechanical reasons. Maybe someone wants to have internal armor plates installed around vulnerable points of their body to protect their internal organs. That sounds like a small bump to armor class if you ask me. Or maybe someone wants to pay to have their body made more resistant to fire, or maybe someone wants dark vision. I mean, the list goes on, but this is a great opportunity to let the players get some cool and unique boons if they've got the gold to pay for it. I also like the idea that players going undercover in a halfling village or something as part of the job all need to get cosmetic surgery to look like halflings. Or maybe they are all halflings and they need to make themselves taller to infiltrate a group of humans. You could also use this as an excuse to introduce some of the magical tattoo items from Tasha's Cauldron, or even just some new magic tattoos that you come up with. And if you want to do something with a bit more intrigue attached to it, maybe there's a Xixchil assassin that needs to get a sample of a noble's blood in order to create a powerful knockout poison to put them to sleep and kidnap them. However, the noble's blood is not going to be easy to get, but it turns out that noble has a twin brother somewhere who was given up for adoption or something, so the party then has to try and find that guy, get a sample of his blood to the Xixchil for whatever reason so that they can make this paralytic poison. Kinda ham-fisted, but could be fun. And with all of that said, you can always just use a Xixchil in any role that any NPC would fulfill. It's just another weird fantasy race to stock the stables of your DM folder and break out at the table once in a while, because I promise you, whether this NPC in question is a big bad of your campaign, a simple farmer, a shopkeeper, the mysterious stranger lurking in the shadows, or the guy who sweeps the streets of Waterdeep, they will not be expecting a giant praying mantis, especially not one with cool tattoos and a knack for surgery. But however you choose to use this monster, as always linked in the description down below, is my 5th edition conversion of this monster, complete with its stats, lore, and everything you will need to successfully run it at your table for free, as always. Did I say as always twice? Maybe, but it is true. And if you are one of my lovely patrons over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can find the high-res PDF version of this monster, including the new lovely artwork created this week by Tam, which is all the same game information, but it's a little bit of a fancy schmancy presentation, and is my way of saying thank you to those of you who throw a few extra bucks my way to help me keep doing what I'm doing. And speaking of patrons, thank you so much to our randomly selected patron of the week, who this week is Piscatio. Thank you so much for all the support you throw my way. It means the most. And thank you for watching. This is a weird monster. I had a ton of fun researching it. Had even more fun talking about it. Couldn't get me to shut up about a weird, cool bug guy. But anyways, that's more or less all I got for you this week. I do want to say a quick thank you to those of you who were at GameCon Canada this year and came out to play some games with me or just say hi. It was a ton of fun. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll see you there next year. And for those of you who happen to be going to Gen Con this year, I'm going to be going there too. I'm running some games. I don't think there's any tickets left for those, but I will be around. If you see me there, do not hesitate to come up and say hi. I would love to meet you. Tell me what your favorite monster is. I certainly will not shut up about what mine is, which varies from day to day. So we'll see what it is at Gen Con. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then.